Welcome back to another video from Reveal Cannabis. Today, I'm going to be talking with Nikki Lawley, and we're going to be talking all about using cannabis for traumatic brain injuries. If this is a new subject for you, you're definitely going to want to stick around. Nikki comes to us not only as a patient and a patient advocate, but she also has a background in pediatric nursing, so she knows her stuff. She says that traumatic brain injury stole her joy and cannabis has helped bring it back. So you're definitely going to want to hear all about what we talk about today. Hi, my name is Andrea Mahard. I'm a certified cannabis coach and educator, and I'm here on YouTube because I'm super passionate about learning about cannabis and then teaching you about it as well, because I believe that quality cannabis education has the ability to actually change the world. If you love this style of video where I get to interview experts in the field, make sure you check out the playlist below. We have talked to lots of interesting people and I have learned so much, so I'm excited to share that with you. All right, Nikki, traumatic brain injury changed your life. So tell us about it. How did you get here to be a cannabis advocate, this big of a cannabis advocate?
Thanks so much for having me, Andrea. Canada is where I learned the most about cannabis, believe it or not. So I have a huge soft spot in my heart for all my Canadian moose mates because you guys have transformed my life in the plant. What happened to me can happen to anyone. I was working as a pediatric nurse just one day doing my job like any other day about 6 years ago, and a child became combative for a vaccine, a routine immunization that we have to give children, and they're not very cooperative. This particular event basically changed my life forever. It was 10/11/2016. And a kid basically tucked his chin, hit me in the head. I threw myself into a wall and then back into his head. So it was a double impact, life-changing injury that I never expected to still be having symptoms 6 years later. So traumatic brain injury is really the invisible illness, the invisible disability, because I look fine on the outside, but when you begin to understand what happens when your head is tousled in that manner, everything changes. The executive function that I used to pride myself on, meaning being able to complete tasks, being able to actually do things all the way through, I can't do anymore. It's a real challenge. Cannabis helps connect those dots and allows me to function. But cannabis wasn't offered as a treatment or a therapy or anything when I first got into this injury. I got hurt at work, so I was forced into the New York State workers' compensation system, which is anything but a patient-friendly system. And I was put on so many different drugs. I was up to 16 pills at one time during one day. And I became suicidal. And I don't say that lightly. I was planning on taking my life. Uh, Random circumstances happened, and I got introduced to the plant, believe it or not, in Las Vegas. In an effort to cheer me up, my husband said, "You love to gamble. Let's go to Vegas and try and make you happy." And Andrea, leading up to that trip in January of 17, it was about 4 months after my injury. And when that happened, I was like, I don't want to go to Vegas. I can't even get out of my house. Like, we can't go. We can't go. But again, my husband, being the insistent human he is like, no, 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 we're going to go. We're going to go. It's going to make you feel better. I couldn't leave the hotel room for 4 days. And I was planning on taking my life that day, looking over a balcony in Las Vegas, and a billboard, a mobile billboard that traditionally advertises escorts and gentlemen's clubs, came driving by saying, "Get your medical marijuana card in Nevada today." I laughed. I said, "Great idea, Nikki. Fry your brain on drugs." You know, Nancy Reagan in full force came back to me in both ears. That same billboard drove by about a minute and a half later. And I mentioned it to my husband, and he's like, let's go do it. You've laughed on pot before." And I mean, had I smoked pot before? Absolutely. Prior to nursing, well, during nursing, I was actually a casino dealer at the same time as I was a pediatric nurse. So I would work 72 hours a week. And I literally, everyone was drinking or doing blow or other
Mhm.
substances. And somebody handed me a joint and I kind of was like, well, this is way better than drinking. So I had used cannabis before, but never dreamed of it as medicine. If you would have told me your kid was on cannabis for seizures, I would have like called Child Protective Services or CPS, what we call it here in the States, and said, you can't give your kid pot. Like that's a problem.
Mhm.
So my mind has 100% changed in every way, shape, and form with regard to cannabis as medicine. I don't get high, I get well. And when I started the journey, so I got my card in Nevada, and I mean,
Mhm.
it was sort of like the first time you walk into, I hate to use this example, but I'm sure we can all relate, most of us anyway. You walk into an adult bookstore, right? And you don't know what to touch, you don't know what to look at because you're afraid, like, your head's like down, like, who's going to see me in here? Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I likened my first dispensary visit to, was like, oh my God, how do I find anything that's going to work? And the poor bud tender that day that got this 40-something-year-old woman that was like a total basket case. Like, I'm a nurse. I don't know if I should do this. I feel like I'm a dope into dope now. And like, I didn't grasp the impact cannabis could possibly have on my life that day. But I ended up buying all kinds of different potions, lotions, uh, edibles. I got 2 joints. I mean, smoking a joint sounded horrific to me at that time because my head hurt so bad. So when you have a severe headache and you think of sucking something into your lungs, I mean, I don't know, it just didn't appeal whatsoever. So that first night when we got back to the hotel, I took all kinds of gummies. I mean, like I probably ate, no exaggeration, 4 different whole packs of gummies. And I didn't feel anything, okay? Like nothing, because hindsight being 2020, I understand that now why I didn't feel anything, but I lack the cytochrome gene that metabolizes cannabis through your liver, and I don't have a gallbladder, and I had weight loss surgery. So those 3 things don't make edibles effective for me, anything first pass digestion. So I wasn't too excited about the whole cannabis route after day 1 of cannabis. Like, it wasn't like this big, "Oh, well, I'm all better now and everything's great and flowery." No, no, no. But my husband said, "Why don't you go smoke one of those joints?" So I did, and Andrea, that was the first day I left that hotel room. That was the first day I was able to willingly go get breakfast. It was so transformative that I couldn't believe it. Like, did I really just smoke a joint and I'm out here like interacting with people? What is going on? And again, so then I kind of thought, oh, it's just in your head, it's really not the pot. It's just, you've had enough of being in the room, and trying to justify that back and forth, because when you have a brain injury, you overthink everything to the maximum. And so,
Plus, you're dealing with all the stigma. Like you're now a dope fiend too, right?
yeah.
Like there's all that chatter going on up there for you as
Oh,
well, I'm
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, like, this is the gateway drug. What's next? You're gonna start shooting heroin? I mean, really, all
Yeah.
that chatter is just continuously in my head. And so when I came to New York, back home, I live in Buffalo, New York. When I came home, I expected to just go into a dispensary because I knew we had medical marijuana here in New York. So I figured, it's just gonna be the same process. Chronic pain was not one of our conditions. So I literally became just as hopeless as I did on that balcony in Las Vegas all over again. And I took more drugs. And then when I would share with the doctors that I was in Las Vegas, and so then they would write, well, if you aren't good enough to go to Vegas, then you're healthy enough and there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. I tried cannabis like for the first time for medicine and it really helped me. No, you smoked it, you just got high. Nope, there's no medicinal benefit if you smoke it. High THC, nope, no benefit. And I kept hearing this and I'm like, well, shit, they're doctors, they must
Yeah.
know more than me. I'm just a nurse. So
Hmm.
it was a very discouraging time. And so I started going down that rabbit hole of hell again. And I had friends in Canada, my moose mates, I affectionately call them. And they saw one of my desperation posts on social media where it was like, I don't think I belong here. I'm too much of a burden for this society. I think I found something that works, but I can't access it in my home state. And I just don't see why I'm here anymore. And friends reached out from Canada and said, "We've got pot here. Just come on over here. We'll get you a medical card. Whatever we got to do, we'll find you something." There began my medical cannabis refugee status of escaping to Canada. Living in Buffalo, New York, I'm 15 minutes from the Canadian border. While I could not bring my medicine back home to New York, I actually invested in a storage area, a storage unit that has all my medical cannabis just on the other side of the border in Niagara Falls, Ontario. And that was like my routine for about 2.5 years, where I would go
You
to
go
Canada,
to
Medica,
medicate.
to medicate and come home.
Oh my God, that is so bonkers to me that's what you had to do in order to get. Okay, go ahead.
I literally did that for about 2.5 years, and then COVID hit. When COVID hit, the border closed. So my knowledge, my experience of everything that I had gone through up until this point of discovering the plant, learning that there's all these chemical compounds in it that can really benefit people. And there's really medicinal benefits to this plant. And then I started to learn about terpenes, and I started to learn about minor cannabinoids. I started to journal my experience on an app called Strain Print that
Mhm.
in Canada was so amazing because they had that back end certificate of analysis, or C of A, that basically tells you what chemical constituents are in the plant. That's how I personally learned what worked and why. I mean, I can't tell you in the beginning when my first LP was licensed producer in Canada was Can Trust, and they had a strain. So I'm up in Canada medicating, enjoying life, and then I would have to come home and be sad again because I didn't have the same medicine. But
Mhm.
it kept me going week to week and week to week to know that Canada's coming, you've got something to look forward to. So I'll never forget, I was playing, I had not been able to discern words or do any kind of like games or anything like that. Like, not that I'm a big game player, but like Scrabble was a big passion for mine. And after the brain injury, like to try and play Scrabble, just shoot me in the head because I can't remember how to spell. I can't remember how to put words together. So I'll never forget one day my husband called me while I was in Canada, and he says, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, what's wrong with me?" He's like, "You sound normal." Like, I'm like, "Well, I am playing Scrabble right now and I'm doing basic math." I'm like, Maybe it's this pot that I'm smoking." And it totally was. It was the specifics of, at the time, original cheese was what it was by Can Trust, which when you start to just go off a name of something, I found it's pretty useless. I
Mhm.
found that Blueberry Kush from Can Trust versus Blueberry Kush from Terra Ascend versus Blueberry Kush from Canna Farms, all three have complete different chemical makeups. Even though they have the same name, the chemical constituents behind the plant are different. People don't talk about that enough. When you have, like in the States, we have multi state operators, right? So you think you're buying Cookies, California, and then you're buying Cookies, Massachusetts. They are not the same product, humans. And even though they might have the same name, it's all about the back end test, and you need to learn what works for you and why based on the chemical profiles. Personally, that's been my experience anyway.
I also am a huge fan of the idea of strain names mean absolutely nothing. I interviewed in one of these interviews a PhD scientist who will die on the hill of strain names do matter. And she has research to back it up. And it's so interesting because I'm with you. I don't think they matter at all. And for many of us, the lived experience is that no, it doesn't. So,
And I
so can
think
we
people that use cannabis actively, can document that a lot different than a lot of these educated PhDs that the science says this, and this. But if they don't consume the product, they really don't understand that. And again, no fault of this person. I'm just saying when you're living it and you try it and it's not the same product, you can really speak to that.
I don't think that's her experience. She's such an interesting scientist. If you want to go watch it, anybody who's watching, because that actually is her perspective, is that like, come on, science, like catch up with what's happening on the ground. But this is something that she sticks strong on. Can we go back to, so you're smoking this specific strain, some cheese strain. Your husband and you realize together that, oh, you sound like old Nikki, you're playing Scrabble like old Nikki, you're doing math problems like old Nikki. Is it at that point you said like, oh, like what's going on here? Where do you go from that point?
So that's when I discovered the Strain Print app. I went to one of these events, I want to say Lyft or one of those that were in Canada, and I was able to actually talk to somebody about the Strain Print app. And then I dove right in and started documenting because it was so easy because the back end was already there. All I had to do was type in Canna Farms, Blue Dream, and boom, it popped up. I didn't have to like enter anything special. I just could focus on my experience. And so the things I treat with cannabis now that I can articulate are cognitive function. That's like the main thing. So brain fog is predominantly my biggest symptom, as well as executive function and thinking. So when I have the right cultivars, that's the thing I treat the most is my cognitive function. So then the second thing is anxiety and depression. And then the third is my chronic pain of my head and neck. So those three distinct areas are how I evaluate every single strain of cannabis. So you can't just say I have a traumatic brain injury. What symptoms of that traumatic brain injury are really causing me the challenge? So chronic pain of the head and neck can cross over multiple disease states, if you will. But for me in particular, I focus on that because I've never don't have a headache since this brain injury. I mean, for 6 years, I've lived with a 7 out of 10 headache because of how my neck got injured. And again, that took months and months and months to figure out. And, you really think you're kind of going crazy and you're told you're going crazy by these doctors. Going from nurse to patient was a huge transition because all the doctors that I once were colleagues to, now basically I was no longer a nurse. Now I'm a patient and now I'm crazy. I'm just some 40-something-year-old woman that can't figure out stuff. And so now she's blaming it on a brain injury. Trust me, no one wanted to be more normal than this girl. I spent $52,000 of my own money trying to get diagnoses and understand, including going to different states, going to Canada, meeting with the best of the best doctors to try and get an answer because no one wanted to go back to work more than this girl. And I couldn't do it. Like if I had to go report to a 9 to 5 job right now, I have good days and I have bad days. There's going to be days that I can totally crush it, but then the next day I'm totally wiped out. I can't function. So every day is about learning what limitations you have and working within them in a way that you don't exhaust yourself. Like for instance, MJ BizCon's coming up in Las Vegas next Monday. I'm there for a week. I'm going to be zipped for like 2 weeks afterwards. And people won't see that. They'll see this happy little blonde just running around talking cannabis and cannabis is love and kumbaya and all that. But at the end of the day, they have no idea what it takes me to get where I am, to be that person, to be able to process after that event.
And tell me about how cannabis changes that for you. So COVID hits, you can't cross the border. What does this mean for you and how much different was it? And presumably now you're able to be medicated again. So how are we here?
So, so what happened was I had to learn what the illicit market was, the legacy market was. And I had to learn that I spent a lot of money on products that didn't work because I don't have C of A's. So, you're going off your nose, which is great sometimes, but at the end of the day, that might not work for you. I find my nose helps a lot, but I mean, like, I don't know, I've spent $150 on 4 different cultivars the other day, and out of the 4 that I thought smelled really great, only 1 worked. So, you can't really gauge it all on smell as much as I wanna say that's a good indicator, it's not a sure thing. So, learning about the legacy market and learning about, how they've flourished in times like prior to legalization, right? There was no, testing. There was no anything. You just knew so and so had good pot, it wasn't
Yeah.
even about the name at that time. So when I found legacy operators that couldn't even tell me the strain name, it was like, yeah, I don't want your pot. And and I mean, not that that means their cannabis wasn't good.
Yeah, you need some basis to like make your decisions
Yeah.
on. Like, give me
Yeah.
something, people.
And when COVID hit, medical cannabis was deemed essential in New York State. In 2018, chronic pain became one of our conditions that was approved so that I could start shopping at a dispensary. And my workers' compensation actually ended up paying for my medical cannabis from New York State.
Mm.
Um, Reluctantly, hugely reluctantly. I had 3 appeals of yes, then no, then yes, then no, and it was just such a seesaw, it was ridiculous. So, New York State C of A's are considered proprietary in our state, so you can't even access them for our medical cannabis products. So, we have these great products, and for a long time, all we had was ground flower. It wasn't even, uh, whole flower. So you got stems, you got leaves, you got crap, and it was $50 an eighth. I mean, that in
And
American dollars.
with any information, did you have a cannabinoid content?
All you had was THC and CBD percent. That's it. Like, that's it.
Okay.
And so you can't smell it, you can't look at it, you have no idea what you're buying blind, and you get it home, and when you open it, and you're so disappointed and like, "Oh my god, did I really just pay $300 for all these different eighths that absolutely look disgusting?" Like,
Mhm.
the flour I just got recently from a huge multi-state operator, was absolutely the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in my life, and we aren't talking about those problems. We're just trying to continue to just sweep things under the rug. It's not about getting high for me, it's about getting well. And so when I find the right medicine, I feel so much better. It connects my dots.
It is incredible to me the lengths that you have had to go in order to use a medicine that we know for a fact is non-lethal, non-toxic, has health promoting benefits, and yet you had to travel to another country and
Another
you have
country.
to pay for your medical cannabis card and then pay to have absolute shit medicine, and you are still out there on the daily advocating for patient rights, for cannabis consumers, and specifically for people who have suffered from head injuries. So, can we dive into what do we know about how cannabis can help somebody who has suffered from head injuries in general? So, concussions, traumatic brain injuries, etc.
So the neuroprotective qualities of cannabis are something the US government has a patent on. So these are again some of the misnomers that blows my mind that it's still Schedule 1. I mean, when we have a patent as a country, the government has a patent saying it's got neuroprotective qualities. When I heard that, it was just like, what? Really started to relate to the football players. Why? Because I could see myself being a CTE person easily, chronic traumatic encephaly, because after that third injury that I had, the really bad one that messed me up while I was nursing, after that, I had 4 more head injuries. So I've had a total of 7. And the 4 that I had after starting to use cannabis were far less impactful than that third one, meaning I passed out for some of them, lost complete consciousness and hit my head. And I looked like a complete spook because I had so many hematomas on my brain that I never would have believed cannabis helped, right? And so I can tell you for certain that cannabis has neuroprotective qualities because I suffered so much less in those subsequent brain injuries. It's truly a neuroprotective. For me, I use either a balanced ratio of THC and CBD or high THC because I am combating pain that I find that I definitely need that THC. Um, and I'm a microdoser all day. So I smoke my medicine, I combust it. For me, vaping does not have the same effect, although I would much rather vape because it's much more healthy. And I would get more terpenes, right? Because as soon as you combust, you're basically burning off a lot of those valuable compounds. But for me, that's what works. And so, as much as I would love to say gummies or tinctures or vaping flower works the same, it really doesn't. I actually have to combust out of a joint or a bowl for that to work. The research indicates that there are certain minor cannabinoids that are very beneficial for brain health and wellness. CBC, CBG they're doing more and more trials on. I find for me, limonene and pinene are my favorite terps that really help with that cognitive function aspect. I find that strains that are really high in myrcene for me give me too much couch lock. They make me feel more brain injured. So for me, that's not the best feeling. But I need some myrcene because that pain relieving component of it, it's really the whole plant. And the more we try and break it apart and try and isolate compounds, I feel the more we're not really targeting the right medicine. I mean, that's what pharma wants. Pharma wants isolated compounds, set dosing, perfect world scenarios, and real world evidence will not support that. In a petri dish, it might work. In a rat, it might work. But in real world, real people, people with brain injuries just need to be able to try it without feeling scared, without feeling that resistance of the war on drugs, the Nancy Reagan in their ear. It took a lot for me. I mean, not a huge lot because I was ready to literally kill myself, but it took a lot for me to see it as medicine, especially after hearing from every single doctor that I saw after this Vegas experience tell me there's no medicinal value, it's all in my head. That was a huge thing, and no longer being regarded as a medical professional, but as a patient. That stigma was real.
Pothead patient.
A pothead patient, a drug seeking patient. That's actually in my medical records that I'm drug seeking and I shouldn't be a medical cannabis patient in New York State because I'm just drug seeking and I use illicit cannabis.
Again, because we are living still in a prohibitionist era, and prohibition is because of three things: racism, greed, and lies, 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 lies. That's it. That's literally why you thought you were a druggie at first, and then they thought you were a druggie, and why people who will, maybe watch this video are going to think we're both druggies because of racism, greed, and lies. Like it fires me up every time. And that is, again, why I'm here because when people understand why we have like this resistance to cannabis as a medicine because of those three things, and how much it can impact somebody's life, to you not being functional and not ready to be here anymore, to you putting in all the time and hard work, like your hard work and effort to be able to use this medicine, and everything that you had to do in order to get to the point where you're like, I know that I need a balanced ratio that has terpinolene to balance out the limonene and the pinene, for you to be able to do all of that so that you can go to MJ BizCon and preach this message and share your story with the world, and then go home and sleep for 2 weeks to catch back up. It sounds to me like this medicine and then your advocacy about how important this is has really like fueled you right back up from like, I'm not ready to be here at all, to like, I need to be here for as long as possible so that more people know about how amazing this is.
Tragedy to triumph. That's what I like to say because literally I was in a tragic, hopeless situation to now being able to speak about the plant and meet wonderful people like yourself. And I have so much support in my network. When you go on my LinkedIn, it's just unbelievable the people that are so kind to me and care about my story. And every single day, Andrea, someone writes me, wow, I had no idea cannabis could help brain injury. Wow, I had no idea cannabis could really help with, memory or cognitive function or anxiety and depression. Like, I give people hope every single day. I'm changing hearts, minds, and lives by this plant. And it's not about Nikki Lawley. It's about this plant. I never sought out to be a influencer, ambassador, or anything of the sort ever. Like, I mean, I just was a very quiet human. I didn't like ever public speak. And now I'm so obnoxious about the plant that, like, go ahead, put me in a room with a naysayer. His mind will be changed by the time I'm done. And I will pull out all stops and just I'm unstoppable at this point. What's cool is I'm part of this group. It's called Americans for Safe Access, AKA ASA, ASA. And we preach patient safety and patient access. And they have their huge Unity conference coming up in Washington, D.C., December 11th through the 15th. I'm going to be part of that actively. And one of the things, just finding sponsors for this organization has been near impossible. And it's one of the best ones out there. I mean, it's sort of like in Canada, you have a real patient focused group, and I
Community.
can't, yeah, you really do. And we're trying to have that in the States, but we have like 50 little countries that we have to worry about, as each one has different regulations. Maryland and Missouri just authorized adult use that just passed. Like, federal, rescheduling, descheduling matters. And while I don't want big pharma to have their paws in it more, we need big pharma. Why do we need big pharma? Because they're the ones that have the money, but they also have the credibility in the doctors' minds. Okay. So we aren't going to change minds and lives like with just me, Nikki Lawley, being a patient, showing that. They want
Disagree.
that hard they want that hard evidence.
I disagree. I think we're on a precipice right now where doctors are having to start to open their minds. And if they are choosing not to, if they are being faced with the evidence from their patients often on the daily, I don't know how often it happens, if they are able to ignore the vast treasure trove of literature that we have that supports the use of cannabis for a multitude of conditions, if they are willing to ignore the fact that we have an endocannabinoid system, this is on them. And although I think that big pharma has its place in this industry for lots of different reasons, including the money and the research and the science, I think it's people like you who understand that this medicine works best when we consume it in its whole plant form, and that we treasure this medicine and that we have some sort of connection to it. I think that our voices are getting louder and louder. So I didn't mean to like get in a debate with you.
But I think in Canada compared to the US, you guys are so much further ahead. And so you do have doctors listening more about the ECS and things like that because of the strong advocate community. And you guys are literally 3 years ahead of anyone in the US, as far as I can tell.
It's
Um,
so funny. I want to just talk about this a little bit more because I love thinking about the difference between American and Canadians in this space in general. I do almost all of my work with Americans. Right now, I'm working with an American company and an American doctor to create a class to teach American doctor, well, any doctor, about the health benefits of cannabis for like a continuing medical education credit, et cetera. And working with him has made me super excited about how I see medical cannabis coming along in your 50 little countries down there. And up here, our medical system has actually been decimated
Yeah.
since federal legalization. In these past 4 years, the number of cannabis prescriptions are going down. The kind of access that we had to plant medicine versus now has really changed. And there's, a fear in the cannabis community that recreation has like wiped out medical. I think this is probably one of those pendulum swings, and we are coming back around to realize like, no, there's lots of people who need consistent quality medication at an affordable price, like to make this accessible. So I see the opposite of you. Like I'm really excited about where the States is going. And I'm like, come on, Canada, like gear up here.
Well,
Uh,
that's a cool perspective because, again, I'm living in a state that, we just went adult use. So, they're trying to figure out where does medical fit in this? How are they going to do it?
I was excited when New York legalized, but the more I've learned about how New York legalized, especially when they were like, oh, don't worry, we've got social equity on our minds. So if you've been impacted by the war on drugs and you happen to have $500,000 and a huge support network, then we'll give you a dispensary. They haven't focused on the impact that the war on drugs has made on people who are right now in New York suffering because of a
Correct.
racist prohibition era. I am so grateful that you were able to give us so much time and to talk to us about cannabis from this really unique perspective that you have. Again, being a nurse who found herself in the situation of being a patient, and how you've completely changed with the help of this plan. So it's been lovely to talk to you.
I really appreciate the time, Andrea, because I truly love my Canadian network and pals and moose mates because you guys are so much further ahead than we are here in New York. I'm excited for MJ BizCon. I'm excited for the Unity Conference coming up. And I really look forward to continuing our conversation and helping any way I can.
Thank you so much. Again, make sure that you like and subscribe if you haven't done this already. Nikki and I can't make millions of dollars off of our YouTube channels because it is impossible for content creators on YouTube to monetize. So we really do depend on you sharing our stuff. So thank you for that. And I will see you on the next video.